Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second of our Access to Finance Funding Future Growth webinar series, delivered in partnership by Chartered Accountants, Ulster Society and British Business Bank. So for those of you that weren't with us last week, my name is Susan Nightingale and I have the pleasure of welcoming you again this morning, both in my capacity as Senior Manager for Northern Ireland within British Business Bank, but also on behalf of the Institute as a member of both the main and public sector committees within Ulster Society. So our aim over the course of these three sessions is simply to raise advisor awareness of the range of finance options available to SMEs who have an ambition to either scale or start a business. Last week was all about debt finance. We looked at startup loans in the Northern Ireland Small Business Loan Fund as a means of supporting early stage and micro businesses and the positive impact of the mentoring support that goes hand in hand with this type of funding. We also looked at some of the later stage debt options provided by White Rock Finance and Upstream Working Capital, how these types of finance complement the more traditional bank offering, and then the role of brokers in bringing these funding packages together. And then, of course, not forgetting the importance of debt finance in helping SMEs in their transition to net zero. So it was a jam-packed session, and if you missed it, the recording along with all the presentations and a list of resources is now available on the Ulster Society webpage. So today we're going to shift our attention slightly and focus on the ScaleUp Economy in NI and the various grant and equity-based funding solutions available to support our scale-up businesses. So in terms of takeaways from today's session, I want you to leave with three things. Firstly, a better understanding of both the opportunities and challenges facing scaling companies in NI and what you as advisors can do to help them either seize or overcome them. Secondly, a better understanding of the government programmes offered by both BBB and Innovate UK so that you can then signpost businesses to the support available. And then finally, a clearer understanding of the role of finance and particularly equity finance in accelerating and delivering a company's growth strategy, and more importantly, your own role as an advisor in helping to signpost and secure this funding. So just in terms of what we can expect from today's agenda, Irene Graham, CEO of ScaleUp Institute, will provide an overview of the NI ScaleUp Economy and talk one-on-one with Hugh of Cirdan about what local scale-ups say they need. We'll then hear from Lorraine Acheson of Innovate UK, before moving into a panel discussion on the current market conditions for scaling businesses, when we'll be joined by representatives from London Stock Exchange, FinnCap, BGF and Simple Scaling. I'll then pick up with an overview of how BBB is supporting the scale-up economy before talking to David Ferguson about the impressive growth story of Bob and Bert's and how equity funding from BGF has helped to make that all possible. So plenty to keep us entertained between now and 12. On that note, I'd like to hand you over to Irene.
Good morning, everyone, and always delighted to be with the Northern Ireland economy. My grandmother was a Northern Irish gal, and I'm just sorry not to be present with you. Last time I was there, I was in Investor NI's offices, Hunting H, I think at the time, but delighted to be here and delighted to be joining you this morning. As Susan says, we're going to just walk through a little bit about the Northern Irish scale-up economy, give you a sense of what's happening, give you a sense of what our Northern Irish scale-ups are saying are their issues, and we'll hear from Hugh, who'll give you the real live world for him today and what his journey and the company's journey has been. So without further ado, let me just focus in on why is scaling up important and why have we been set up as a ScaleUp Institute, which is a private-led institution. We set ourselves up to deal with the challenge of scaling up that we have in the UK economy. We are very good at startups, third in the world, but we're 13th in scaling up, so lag behind our counterparts in being able to scale businesses. And when we look at the ingredients of those ahead of us in scaling up their companies, there's three things that we see as very critical. One is that depth of and range of activity that they have in the long term, and also that depth of finance, which we'll get into further. Most importantly, why are scale-ups important? Well, because they are the drivers of our UK economy. They are the companies that are driving the SME economy as well. We often talk about that whole range of SME companies as if they're one homogenous group, but we really do need to, and that's why I think it's great what is happening here in these last few sessions and forward sessions. We need to actually segment our SME economy, recognise what startups need, recognise what scale-ups need, and recognise what those staying ahead need. So the scale-ups, there's around 33,000 in the UK overall. They generate 50% of the SME economy to the UK. They generate 1.1 trillion of the 2 trillion that SMEs generate. So they're a really important segment. They're across all sectors, all geographies, and they're also highly productive. So our focus is on making sure we sustain and build these companies and also build more of those companies and help these businesses succeed even further. If you look at this from a Northern Ireland perspective, we've grown scale-ups as a UK economy around 23% over the last 8 years, and since we've been monitoring matters. It's slowing down slightly in the last couple of years, and that's what we need to make sure the momentum is maintained. In Northern Ireland, actually, it's great to see that in the latest ONS figures, we see growth in your overall scale-ups. You're now up to 895 scale-ups, either growing by turnover or employment or both. And they generate 11 billion to the UK economy in Northern Ireland. So in Northern Ireland, 11 billion being added every year and employing around 62,000 people. You also have a very healthy pipeline of scaling businesses in Northern Ireland. There's another 540 businesses that are growing between that sort of 15 to 19.9%, which we want to foster and make sure they come through into that scale up phase, because they have huge opportunities as well to support the local economy. And what's really critical as we look at this overall environment is also how many of our scale-ups are breaking through the 10 million plus barrier, and where Northern Ireland itself sits across the rest of the country. So Northern Ireland, we look at how the growth pattern of scale-up businesses and what exists across our 100,000 of population, what that trend of growth rate is. And in Northern Ireland, you're growing at around 2.6 scale-ups per 100,000 of population, which we always put the benchmark at 1, and you're right up there, just behind London in that growth rate. So one of the things in all of what we're doing here today is working out how we make sure that continues to be at that pace and rate, and how that develops further as we go forward. You're also doing well in having scale-ups that break through the 10 million plus barrier of turnover. These are what we call the visible scale-ups, those that we can see at Companies House. There's 208 in Northern Ireland. That's up around 28% in 2020 from 2019, so even more growing even despite of COVID. You're clustered in a whole range of different sectors: industrials, business and professional services, environment, infrastructure, supply chain and retail, so a good mix of sectors. So one of the things is when we track the visible scale-ups is also looking at where the funding arrangements are and where the funds are coming from. And I think what's positive is, and you're going to hear from BGF later, there is a range of funders and financiers operating in Northern Ireland in terms of generating the overall access to finance needed for our growth companies. Many of those are based actually outside of Northern Ireland, and many are based inside Northern Ireland. And the role of Invest NI and the British Business Bank is very clear in that. And I think we need to make sure we're making sure that continuum of finance is available to all of our scale-up companies. We'll move on to the next slide, Josh. The drivers of local growth are very critical. We see 3 critical drivers, having looked at all forms of aspects to what might be the drivers of local growth, from transport to lending and just traditional bank lending, or even startup density. But what we see are real drivers are access to skilled talent, clusters and hubs, and access to equity. So it's really important that we do make sure the talent, the growth capital in equity, and the linkage to clusters and hubs links up effectively in the Northern Ireland economy. And that knowledge sharing, active university engagement and local collaboration are three key factors that really make a difference at a local level in driving forward that talent cluster and equity access, and something that I know is a very strong focus within the Northern Ireland economy overall.
Just to step in whilst Irene's having some sound trouble. So this obviously, this is Josh from the ScaleUp Institute here. As you can see, this is sort of a highlight of some of those clusters which Irene was just mentioning there. We have done an assessment across the whole of the UK, and you can see that there are some clear clusters developing in Northern Ireland as well. If we move on, this is looking at results from a Northern Ireland survey. So whilst there's a small sample size for this, this is in line with the broader trends of this is in line with the broader trends that we found in our survey across the UK. So whilst this is a small sample size, the actual results are relevant to the sort of 700 respondents that we have across the piece. And what you can see is that access to UK and international markets is right up there in terms of one of the number one challenge that companies sort of highlight as what they face when they're trying to scale up, followed by access to talent, and followed by access to the right equity and bank finance in the main. Interestingly, infrastructure is fairly low. It's not a huge challenge that's highlighted in this survey, but that may simply be that it's not seen as the most critical in relation to the other three sort of things that are ahead of it. And if you force rank it, those stay broadly the same. And what you can see is that access to non-executive directors and mentors and peer networks is also pretty much, neck and neck. Those are critical factors which people recognise, and that forms a really central part of the hub infrastructure, which Irene was mentioning before, where actually the access to hubs, access to meeting places, access to areas where businesses and financiers and people who have the right services that scale-ups are looking for can all come together and find the right place to sort of engage with each other. That is really at the heart of many local scale-up ecosystems. What we can also see here is that actually, scale-ups are increasingly recognising that they need access to greater government resources, and what they usually want is a single point of contact for that. And that's something which is increasingly seen as relevant within both policy circles, but also within the hubs themselves and the way in which people are arranging themselves to engage more directly with scale-up businesses. And also what you can see is that 60% want to do more with universities and R&D, and this is something which again is a hallmark of a solid ecosystem, is finding the right way to engage with academic institutions and making sure that businesses that are either generated as spin-outs from those institutions, or indeed those that would like access to the resources and talent that universities can offer, have an easy route to do so is increasingly important within this. We've done an assessment of all of the programmes that there are in the UK. This is a breakdown of those that are available in Northern Ireland. I think what's important within this is that as you saw from the survey, and as is the case across the whole of the UK, access to markets has become an ever more important issue. What we found when we're doing this assessment, this detailed assessment of each of the local areas and the programmes on offer, is that actually the number of programmes that are around to enable people to access markets more effectively is substantially lower than those around for leadership development. And that's not to say that leadership development isn't critical and important, and it absolutely is. What we're seeing is that whilst demand for leadership programmes is beginning to be met, and there are over more leadership programs being developed to meet scale-up's needs, there are fewer programs relating to corporate procurement and collaboration, government procurement, and also access to international markets. So that's an important area to focus upon. So if we think about access to growth capital, this is something which we've done a deep dive report on at the ScaleUp Institute. What you're seeing in Northern Ireland is that 3 in 10 are planning on using equity finance, so relatively low demand. But actually, what you're seeing here is that 5 in 10 perceive they don't have the right capital to meet their growth ambitions, and that's a really important thing to make sure that companies feel confident about as they consider their future growth options. So that forms a solid part of our policy recommendations, and these are things which we update every year. We refresh them in line with the developing policy landscape, and what we're looking for in relation to this is making sure that people have the right access to talent. So we focus very strongly on the scale-up visa, for instance, which you've seen being announced earlier this year by government. Also looking at the way in which scale-ups can be better championed, and you can deploy local scale-up champions to really engage companies and ensure that they have the ability to understand how a company can get from where they are now to a growth ambition and scaling up fully. And part of this is really understanding how to segment scale-ups more effectively on a local level and nationally, so that the programs that do exist are better tailored to the needs of the companies themselves. Because as Irene was mentioning in the introduction, if you have a company that's in a growth phase, they need a different suite of services. And I think also they're often very time poor. And that's one of the key things to remember. It's a hallmark of being a scale up, is that a lack of time to engage with and search through what can be quite a complex ecosystem can turn the company off, and they may very well change their growth plans or adjust their growth ambitions as a result of what they then find when they look at that marketplace. That's why having a cluster, why having a hub and having sort of an account managed solution where an account manager can proactively look for that company, can proactively engage with that company, develop a trusted bond with that company, and then seek out the right programs and solutions for them at their time of development, it is really, really, really clear, really critical. That also links very closely with other elements of the way in which a scale-up will pursue their journey, whether that's looking at how they can engage with international markets and having a trusted source of information on the way in which those markets can be perhaps assessed. One of the things we're seeing developing elsewhere is the use of alumni networks and broader networks such as Global Scot in Scotland is one which has frequently come up, where there's a reference to the idea of what a company can do to have a softer landing when they look abroad. That's pretty critical, but it all plays back into that hub idea. So if we're moving on here, one of the things that's really important along the whole of this is understanding the way in which the finance needs of a company is really organized across over time. And we talk about this in terms of the escalator of finance. And from a policy perspective, this is really important because these are all often covered by different departments, by different bodies and by different entities, but this is one scale-up's journey. And I think the important thing to bear in mind for practitioners in this space, advisors and others that are seeking to help scale-ups, is making sure that this can be as smooth as possible, this escalator can be as smooth as possible, and that there is a solid knowledge of the way in which all the different players in this space are able to function and work in a way that really connects that journey up in a way that makes sense for the scale up. And that's really where advisors and others come in. It's about understanding the role of Innovate UK, understanding how they can access grants and the challenge funds, how that then connects into the angel network, how it connects to VCs, and understanding how that then links into the broader services that the British Business Bank and others such as Invest NI have on offer, which then takes you right the way through to other options, whether that's ultimately an IPO or whether it's a different sort of set of investors for the growth capital round. This also links into the advisory, into the account management piece I was talking about before, where actually if you don't have the right solution, if someone doesn't have the right solution for a business, it's really important that that business isn't then left. They need to be able to be connected to someone that actually might have the right either program or service, and that could be more a different finance product, but it could also be access to the right talent or leadership development courses to really take them to the next level, or indeed access to non-executive directors who would help them to shape their offering and shape where they're going to that next stage, which will then make them more ready for the service they may have actually been looking for in the first instance. And so when we look at growth capital across the UK, we did a deep dive assessment on this during COVID, and we found that actually the growth capital gap roughly doubled due to COVID. We'd seen an assessment from the Patient Capital Review and others onwards that it was roughly about 7.5 billion. We found doing an assessment of the funding available last year that this had doubled to roughly 15 billion, which equaled roughly 200 million in the Northern Ireland Wales breakdown that we had to use in terms of the segmentation of the funding available. What we've seen as a result of that, though, is the development of things like the Future Fund Breakthrough and also a recognition of the importance of unlocking institutional investment. And that's something which hopefully, and we'll see how that develops over time, but hopefully that will be coming down the pipe in terms of having greater funds available. However, that does then need to link into relatively mature ecosystems in order to ensure that capital can be deployed. And this is partly what we've been looking in terms of expanding and the understanding of the demand side on this in relation to the regions across the whole of the UK and devolved nations, but also helping advisors and institutional capital funds themselves better understand the growth economy. So I think one of the key things here is making sure that those knowledge base inventories can be closed. We're doing in this educational series with the British Business Bank across all areas of the UK. We've also developed an investing creative tool working with the UK Business Angels Association, looking at how in this instance, particular sector can be perhaps demystified for angel investors and others in the growth economy. We're looking at expanding that further, but you'll be able to see that online. So that's it from me in terms of slides. I think that the next thing to do, and I think we may have still lost Irene on this, but the next thing to do is really to say hello to Hugh. Hugh, are you with us still?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Hugh, and thanks a lot for coming along today. It'd be really great to hear about your story and just some of the journey that you've had, and also some of the challenges that you've identified when we've spoken before about working in this space in a growth business, and also understanding sort of some of the intricacies in the Northern Ireland market. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, Hugh, and there we go. Over to you, Hugh, but if you'd like to come back in, that's all fine as well.
Yeah, hi folks. Cirdan, this company started just over 10 years ago, and the founders of the company came from an imaging background, and in fact we had been in a previous company which we helped found and develop and take to IPO, company Andor Technology, which was subsequently sold to Oxford Instruments. But we were looking to get involved in medical imaging, and it actually came from a conversation, ad hoc conversation I had with a pathologist in Minnesota, and I asked her what was her most important tool that she had in her sort of toolkit, and she said her eyes, and it sort of surprised me and shocked me. And she said she spent a lot of her time looking down a microscope, looking at tissue, looking at samples, looking at microculture plates, and describing in words what she saw, i.e. she redacted those images. And as coming from an imaging company, I was like, well, where's the camera? And she admitted that they had a camera, but it was locked away, and they only took it out for special occasions or when they were doing a publication or something. So that started on the journey to look to try and bring imaging into the fore, and obviously, you know, that data in those images, there's huge wealth of information in that we can extract, and using the new machine learning technologies, there's a lot of value and insights you can develop on those things, and that's really where we started. So we started off and we raised some money from founders and friends and family, and it came about 2 million. We went for sort of Series A type funding to help sort of develop the product we had in mind to be able to capture those images and have it at the heart of the lab, a pathology lab, and being able at the heart of the pathology lab to run the operations of the lab and be able to access that information, store that information, and then to look at ways to be able to get insights and value from that information. And that took us a little longer than we hoped, but it took us up and you know, to the point where we've got the product to the market now. And we're looking then for like a Series B type funding, and that's where we're, you know, we'd expected to. And part of the time between Andor and working for Cirdan, I'd spent a sabbatical, a couple of years working in the States, and there you have deeper pockets and easier access to capital. But we were looking for funding to take us to the next level, and that's something then that we're looking at this point, is being able to take us to the next level in terms of funding. Then COVID hit, and we sort of had to put our plans on hold a bit, because our main customers were a significant number of pathology labs. We were doing a lot of pathology testing and a lot of COVID testing therefore we had to spend time supporting them and working with them to help, you know, scale up to do that COVID testing and really put our ambitions to raise the funding on hold. We were, though, fortunate to be able to get the future funds funding, convertible loan, which helped us mean that we could defer our funding round and focus on helping support our customers. And whenever I find that whoever came up with that sort of you know, that's the mechanism, you know, the future funds, I'm going to have to hug them, because, you know, it was really good for our business, but I think it was good for lots of businesses, and I think it was very apt and very quick, and it was a very good process, and I think it was a joy to see a government reacting very quickly and being able to step in there and provide that funding. But, you know, you talked there about the funding being a series of an escalator. I see it more as a series of stepping stones, and particularly here in Northern Ireland, I think, and probably in other regions, it feels too often that those stepping stones are too small, that the level of funding, the valuations are too low, the amount of funding available is too low. and they're further spaced apart, and that's a difficulty for a business that I think needs to be addressed. That funding cohesion to make that a continuous escalator rather than series stepping stones, because the smaller they are and the further they are apart, the bigger the risk and businesses falling by the wayside. I think also too many businesses, particularly here in Northern Ireland, IOSB, sell out short and sell their businesses too early, and there's a lot of opportunity to grow the business better. Well, one of the things I saw also in the US, more so than here, is that the willingness of public service to support businesses, particularly small businesses. You know, they've got the SBIR grant, but they've also got funding programs and sort of procurement programs geared around trying to get businesses and to scale up and help support them. And that's something we don't do well in the UK generally, and particularly not well at all here in Northern Ireland. That I think that needs to be addressed as well. How we can help get businesses. We are, as a business, we already export considerably most of our business. We have offices in outside skirts of Melbourne, Australia, and we have offices in the outskirts of Toronto in Canada. And we find it easier to deal with the Canadian government and the Australian government than we can with our own local government, and trying to get business through the NHS and then through the HSE-NI here in Northern Ireland. And it's I'm always worried that sometimes I'm going to get asked that question, you know, when we're selling into labs in Australia. So how much business do you have at home? And we sort of have to admit that we don't have a lot, because it's much more difficult procurement and issues in terms of willingness to buy local and buy support businesses that are scaling up, which is something that I think needs to be looked at as something that's part of the ecosystem that's going to be very important. We have been very fortunate with our relationships with university. We've always run KTP programs, and they've had great benefit to our business. We've been able to adapt technologies that the universities here in Northern Ireland are very strong, and there's good IP there that they can help, and good innovations there that can help our business and grow. So from that infrastructure side, we're always very fortunate to have that benefit there, and the KTP scheme is a great ability to access that for a business that's looking to scale up and grow, which is something that we always feel that has been a great benefit to us in our future direction. We always say that a business is not built on one great innovation, one blockbuster innovation. It's built on a series of innovations that you can apply to your market, and being able to seek out those right innovations and get the right skills and knowledge, and in the company to be able to deliver them for the market you have and the domain that you're in, which for us is those pathology labs worldwide. So we're not quite at the 10 million turnover, but we will be next year, and we're certainly scaling up, and we're now in a position where we've got our product, we've got good export markets, and really we're looking to scale up quite significantly over the next 4 to 5 years. And we're looking to grow tenfold in the next 5 years as a scale of the business opportunity. The previous company I was in was a nice business, but the business we're in now has much bigger legs and much bigger opportunity than what we had before. So we're looking to that journey, and we're looking to see what support we can help both our fellow businesses in this area, and also what support we can get from people like the ScaleUp Institute and with our local support here, Invest Northern Ireland and other agencies, and how we can help support our journey.
That's fantastic, Hugh. Thank you very much for that. I think it's really important, the reflections you had just at the end there about how, as you go on your journey, you do have the opportunity to find that support and sort of think about how things can be tied together for you, because ultimately it shouldn't necessarily be incumbent on you to have to cross all of those hurdles, which everyone's crossing. It shouldn't be complicated for everyone every time. There should be a smoother route as possible to get there.
If we're reducing the friction, we'll have a lot more businesses scale up faster and stronger, and we'll be able to compete much better in the international market. If we reduce that friction, and those areas where that friction is what we need, and that's to help support around that friction areas. Yeah.
Excellent. That's amazing, Hugh. Thank you so much. That's a really good point to leave it on, actually, and it does give me the opportunity to segue very neatly into Lorraine Acheson, who's the manager for Northern Ireland for Innovate UK, who is one of those key practitioners, one of those key sort of people in the ecosystem, and it's really great to hear from you, Lorraine, on what you guys are up to in the space.
Thanks very much, Josh, and Hugh. I guess listening to you, I hear your pain, and I know as a government agency, we offer lots of support for businesses, but there's more that we can do, and hopefully, Hugh, this will be informative for you as for the advisors on the call, and that there'll be some good nuggets in here. So lovely to meet everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to chat to you all today. If we were face to face, I would now be saying, put your hands up if you have heard of Innovate UK, and put your hands up if you had advised any of your clients on applying for our funding. So maybe put in the chat yes if you're in that bracket, or no if you've never heard of us, because it's always good to see who knows who we are. Now, as I said, I'm Innovate's manager for Northern Ireland. I always apologise for my accent because I am based here and I do live in Belfast, despite my accent. I think that's important and kind of shows our commitment to all regions in the UK. But essentially, Innovate UK is the innovation agency of the UK. And what we mean by that is if UK government wants to give money to businesses to innovate and to do R&D, they give it to Innovate UK and we give it out to businesses through competitions. And we do this to drive productivity and growth. And the tools that we use specifically are funding and growth support. And this is available to businesses across all sectors and across all UK regions. So another question, and again, you might want to use the chat, but how much funding would you say Innovate UK has committed to Northern Ireland since 2015, so over the last 6 years or so? So the answer is 190 million. So over the last 6 years, we've given out 190 million in grants, and they range from grants for 25k to a startup in the creative industries, to large collaborative awards, to most recently a Seagate-led consortia looking at nanomanufacturing. So we've got that whole array in terms of the size of funding we give out. But what about applications from Northern Ireland? How would you say our numbers look when it comes to the proportion of applications from Northern Ireland? So the answer here is 1.5%. So we get the least amount of applications from Northern Ireland, and that's not surprising, we're the smallest region in the UK. But no matter how you cut it, if you cut it by business population or other factors, we still come out with the least amount of applications here. And there are some good reasons for that, not least there's already R&D funding available from Invest NI. But the message I want to put across here is that although we get the least amount of applications from Northern Ireland, when businesses do apply, their applications are just as likely, or if not more likely, to be successful than other parts of the UK. So what we see is that the applications we do get from Northern Ireland are of a really high quality. And we really wish to invite more applications from businesses in Northern Ireland. So we're famous primarily for the funding that we give, and in particular the grants. And as I've said, we give grants to single companies for amounts as small as 25k to large collaborative grants of many millions. But what's perhaps less known is that we also give loans, and we also have a programme that involves an equity partnership. So I'm going to talk to you about these now, really at a high level, but hopefully give you a taste for the different options that are available for your companies. So in terms of the grant funding, as I've said, this is probably what we're most famous for. All our grant funding is available through competitions, and it's offered to businesses that submit the best proposals on our online process. The competitions we run are often open just to a single applicant, so one business, or they may be collaborative, which means a business working with other businesses or with a research partner like one of the universities. And that can be a local university, but we fund collaborations across the UK. So that might be a collaboration with a business or a university partner anywhere in the UK. And all our processes are online. And just some examples of the companies locally that we have given our grants to would include Randox and Catagen, Artemis Technologies, Cumulus Neuroscience, a real range of businesses from all sectors and all parts of Northern Ireland and all different sizes. And the competitions themselves vary. So the Sustainable Innovation Fund is an example of a fund that was specifically developed during COVID. A bit like Hugh was talking about the Future Fund. I think last year we did see government working together to come up with some quick fire funding opportunities that were going to meet the needs of business during last year. So Sustainable Innovation Fund was one of the programmes that we offered last year. Our SMART programme is really well known. It's live at the moment, and that's open to businesses of any size from any sector, and that's from 25k to £2 million grants. But then we would also have sector-specific competitions, and an example of that is the biomedical catalyst, and that's worked really well in Northern Ireland, particularly because of the large range of health and life science companies here. So there's a real mix of grant funding out there, and everything is on our competitions page, and it changes all the time. I looked this morning prior to coming on, and there's 20 competitions live today. So this is just a quick example from a local SME, TAP SOS. So TAP SOS is an inclusive non-verbal communication system that connects people with UK emergency services. And last year, during the pandemic, what we know is that there was a huge rise in domestic abuse. And accessing the Sustainable Innovation Fund, TAP SOS founder Becca Hugh adapted the technology to create a new app and support for domestic abuse victims. So that's just a very simple example of how that fund last year was used to enable the TAP SOS offering to grow. So that's our grants. In terms of our innovation loans, this really is funding for later stage R&D, where there's a clear route to commercial success. And already we've committed over 80 million. And again, with COVID, we had a specific fund, COVID continuity loans for those businesses who were already working with us and who needed continuity of funding. And we've supported over 200 companies. And what's really interesting to me is that this loan has been really attractive to businesses in Northern Ireland. I told you before about our very low application rates across the board, but actually when it came to the first iteration of innovation loans, we did a pilot of 30 million about 3 years ago. Actually, the applications from Northern Ireland were really high and it worked really well. And some of the companies who've benefited from the loans include Exploristics, Cradle, Catagen. So in terms of the innovation loans, they are open to single applicant SMEs. They offer a below market interest rate. In terms of the length, it's 7 years and it's flexible and patient, and up to 100% of project costs can be covered. So again, we find that a different offering, but very attractive to businesses. Our investor partnerships bring together a grant from Innovate UK with equity investment for either an aligned VC or angel. And that is really aimed at early stage projects and companies to allow them to have 100% of their costs covered, but getting access to that investor finance as well. And the last grant that I wanted to talk about is Sbri. And again, Hugh alluded to a similar program that runs in the US. And this is trying to bridge that really clear procurement challenge that is out there, which is really around how can government agencies use the procurement mechanisms to actually stimulate economic growth, so help our local businesses at the same time as meeting their challenges. So in the Sbri example, government organisations identify a challenge and they advertise for innovative businesses to help them address that challenge. So rather than just going to a traditional procurement route where they say we want X to address this challenge, they just go out with the challenge and say this is our problem, who can help us solve it. So from a business perspective, the business then gets 100% of their costs covered. They get a contract with that agency for up to $1 million. And importantly, they're getting that kind of first customer. We've seen that work really well. A local company, Camlin, has recently been successful in one of our SBRIs. We know companies really like it. And we know that in Northern Ireland, a lot of the departments and agencies here have been emulating the Sbri approach. So that is a whistle stop of our funding. And I just want to turn briefly to the growth support that we offer. And Innovate UK Edge has been developed to help UK businesses grow and scale. So it's the new name for what was Enterprise Europe Network. And it's our flagship business growth service, and it's based in each region. So here in Northern Ireland, the team is based at Invest NI, although they work for Innovate UK Edge, and they offer 3 main areas of support for businesses. So they allow businesses to work with them to help manage their innovation process more effectively. They work with businesses to build their investor readiness, and they support businesses to enter global markets. And an example here in Northern Ireland is of the company Born Maverick. So Born Maverick was founded by a biotechnologist. It's based in NI, as I've said, and they work with leading R&D labs to design and develop novel plant-based foods. So I think the prawns on this picture are actually not prawns. I think they're plant-based. So working with Innovate UK Edge, the team actually worked with them to secure a local grant in the first instance, so an Invest NI grant and an innovation voucher, which allowed them to develop some new non-dairy products. Innovate UK Edge then worked with them to accomplish a strategic pivot, which allowed them to align with some emerging market opportunities and then secure an Innovate UK grant of £69,000, and also to look at global opportunities. So they're now talking to industry players in 5 countries and looking at licensing deals. So really practical support there, where a team on the ground based at Invest NI, working in collaboration as well, I should say, with Invest NI, is helping businesses to access and look at all those different areas, both funding but also global market opportunities. The last part of our support I wanted to mention today is the KTN. So the KTN was previously the Knowledge Transfer Network, and they really have deep sector-specific expertise and support, which allow businesses to connect to others, to connect to ideas, to connect to partners, to supply chains. They're based across the UK, and there is a free service that's accessible to all businesses. I'm mindful this is a whistle-stop tour. We offer a huge range of funding and support. You can find full information on our competitions page and sign up to email alerts so that you know what opportunities are available. They'll come straight to your inbox.
Thanks for that, Lorraine. And I think there's just so much to be aware of there, and really key to raise awareness of some of the loan and equity partnerships that the audience may have been less familiar with. It might be worth mentioning just some of the grant writing masterclasses you sometimes deliver to help with the applications. But one quick question I have for you, I just thought it might be useful if you could talk us through the differences between the R&D grant funding provided by Innovate UK versus that provided by Invest, as I know that often comes up for advisors.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Susan. It's probably the question I get asked the most. And I guess the first thing I would say is that there's a real suite of funding available to businesses in Northern Ireland. So there's funding available at a regional level from Invest NI, there's national funding, there's European funding, there's Island of Ireland funding. So there's a suite of funding which is brilliant on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's actually quite confusing. And I think that's what we've heard consistently, and Josh was talking about that from the ScaleUp Institute's research. So I guess some very key differences are our funding, and there's pros and cons. Our funding is competitive, so it's advertised online. You need to look out for it and apply, and there's no guarantees with any of these things. But if you do get the funding, and when I talk to businesses locally about why did you apply for Innovate UK funding, the two things that come up are the actual size of the funding. So our funding amounts, we don't negotiate. So if it's a feasibility study, the rates are 70% funding for an SME. And with Invest NI, it might be 30 or 40 or 50%. So our rates are more generous, however, it's competitive. So I should say I'm based at Invest NI pre-COVID, and it's fair to say colleagues work more on a one-to-one basis with businesses when they're applying for Invest NI's grant for R&D. So it's a lot more of a personal approach, and businesses will be more likely to understand if they're going to be successful. However, the funding that they get will be less. So there's an issue about the process. There's a difference in terms of the funding. But the third difference, which is cited frequently to me as a positive from businesses, is the credibility that the Innovate UK brand gives them. So when I've been talking to businesses and said, obviously this is a very competitive process, what made you want to go through with it? They said actually it's that stamp of approval, particularly when they are going for future funding. And I remember distinctly that conversation with Brainwave Bank, who are now Cumulus Neuroscience, a few years ago. They've won a number of our grants, and they received recently just announced £6 million investment through LifeArc and the Dementia Discovery Fund. And I think it's that recognition that Innovate UK funding was part of their growth journey.
Yeah, I think certainly the Innovate UK funding is critical and really de-risks it for a lot of angel investors coming in. So it's key to that. Look, thanks very much for that, Lorraine. Okay, so on to the next session. If I can hand you over to Stuart Rock from ScaleUp Institute. Stuart's going to host a panel of experts for us who will give us an update on the market conditions faced by scale-ups at the moment. So Stuart, over to you.
Thank you, Susan, and I hope my panelists are going to reveal themselves in all their glory. James, Gemma, Brendan and Bod. Let's see you all. Ah, marvellous. That's great. Lovely to see you all. Maybe just to very quickly, obviously James Thompson is with FinnCap, Gemma Hamilton is with BGF, Brendan McGurgan from Simple Scaling, and Bob Buckby is the Regional Head of Primary Markets at the London Stock Exchange Group. Very good to have you all. The data that says that, we saw that Northern Ireland is a very dynamic region for the growth in the number of its scale-up businesses. Is that what you're seeing in the market? That there is a lot of dynamism and growth in the market, and that's one really pretty. First of all, for James and Gemma. First of all, James.
Yeah, I think that's right. Certainly, from a primary issuance perspective in the UK, we're seeing the amount of sort of inbound on IPOs, and indeed the sort of amount of IPOs hitting the market at the moment at levels that have been unprecedented in my career, so sort of 12, 15 years. And I think that's a lot of factors. That's kind of confidence returning when there's a sort of a Brexit deal. I think conversely, COVID was a positive thing for the markets in that a lot of liquidity entered the markets because of initial maybe over worrying as the extent of the pandemic. As that relaxed and people saw a way through, confidence has definitely returned.
Yeah, I would agree, James, as well. I mean, we've backed, I think it's 6 or 7 companies now in Northern Ireland and well over 50 million. And that's businesses across all sectors. It's not, I think people think when, growing businesses, they've got to be early stage tech. We back a lot of family owned traditional manufacturing engineering businesses. I think what we found, Stuart, certainly during COVID, I mean, we actually invested, I think it was in April last year when the manufacturing site was closed, into a kind of large blinds manufacturer called Missouri Group, Decora Blinds. So for us, we definitely still saw activity in the market. I think during after probably summer this year, where we did see a bit of slowdown in terms of new investment. And I think, a lot of business owners probably just paused and thought, actually, what's going to happen here? What are the impacts of COVID? So for us, we saw more kind of sale mandates, but we are now starting to see a lot of new investment work coming through the advisors, actually. And I think it's been a case of management teams have decided either, right, if they don't do something now, if they stand still, their competitors will go off and beat them and storm ahead. I think a lot of them have realised now is probably not the right time to sell. Now that could be market driven, impacts of COVID. And I think they've just realised, they need to sort of basically continue growing and then sell, and hopefully a better valuation later down the line. And I think there's also that kind of element. We've backed a lot of family owned businesses where they've realised probably they're just not ready to sell yet, and there's more to go at. So we're starting to see a lot of management teams actually, they've had that time during COVID to assess what's next. And now it's up to them to think, right, what could they do with funding? Could they actually go and expand overseas? Or could they recruit all these people that they talked about doing? So for us, we're relatively positive around the market. There's still going to be challenges along the way, but certainly there's that entrepreneurial spirit amongst the business owners.
That's very good to hear. Bod, how does Northern Ireland feature on the radar for the stock exchange in terms of, because there's been a lot of IPO activity this year?
There has, and there's been a lot of IPO activity across Northern Ireland from a very low base. So actually we've seen the number of listed companies in Northern Ireland over recent years go from 1 to 4. So, you know, in terms of percentage numbers, that's enormous, probably one of the greatest growth rates anywhere on the planet. But we can see, more importantly, I think, a fantastic pipeline of other future IPOs that are looking seriously at that route in a way that perhaps they just didn't before. And you know, this is not something that I would say is unique in any way to Northern Ireland as one of the regions in the UK, but there's a definite sense across, whether you're looking at even the northwest of England, northeast, certainly in Scotland, that somehow the London capital markets aren't relevant to the companies in those regions, and that there's quite often, you know, I wouldn't even say it's a lack of ambition, but almost a modesty around some of the businesses in the region, in just thinking, oh well, you know, we're not ready. Yeah, the most recent Northern Ireland IPO is a brilliant business called Diaceutics, which is a life sciences business which listed in March 19, and you know, was just at that sort of crossover point of around 10 million sales that we heard from Hugh at Cirdan earlier, and employed a small handful of people. Really decided to come to market. Was a really successful IPO, and actually won the European small cap IPO of the year across the whole of Europe. You know, so this is a small business that probably thought that, you know, are we too small? You know, but actually they took that step and have been fantastically successful.
Yeah, so it's a great company. I talked to the team just after their IPO, and it's a fantastic business. I wonder whether you reflect on equity finance, which we know is, you know, can be the rocket fuel for many companies to accelerate their growth. Whether you think there's in Northern Ireland there is more knowledge and take up of equity finance than there has been in the past. I'll put that one, you know, to Gemma first, but James, perhaps you'd like to pick that one up as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Stuart. And I think, you know, there's a lot of investors at the earlier stage side of the market. And then where BGF fits in, we're typically investing in businesses with turnover 1 million, right up to 100 million, and typically investing between 1 and 15 million a day one. And I think, you know, it took us time to get our first investment over the line back in the days, and it was a traditional family-owned house builder that were unclear as to what an equity funder would bring to the table. But I think through actually the advisory network, we have really built, you know, a strong kind of hopefully positive reputation within the market. And we are very much, when we speak to companies, you know, go and speak to your advisors to see what it's like taking on equity. What are the benefits? What does it mean for them? So I think over, you know, we've been investing there now well over 5-6 years, and I think over that time you have seen companies more, you know, willing to sort of take on and have conversations around equity funding. It's not that scary. Oh God, it's just private equity, they're going to take part of my business. We definitely don't see that now in the market.
Was that fear of loss? But there is still a fear of loss of control, James. Is that?
I think that's kind of the sort of never-ending debate between private investment and public investment, right? Is that sort of, you know, PE going to come in, can tell you how to run your business, what you can and can't do, which is, as kind of Gemma said, is, you know, it's typical maybe of some private equity businesses, but certainly not all private investment firms. But in terms of a sort of a public financing point of view, I think Bod's right. There hasn't been a massive take up from Northern Ireland, and that may be just historically. I think the London market has sort of typically sort of catered to London businesses, but I think it's all about, as the advisory network gets more comfortable with sort of what people look for, A, in a business that can float, and B, how these businesses can prepare. That's the number that can certainly increase. And there's certainly, from a sort of public investment point of view, no reticence in investing in businesses that are based in Northern Ireland.
I just want to find on this, and maybe it's to Bod, you'd like to take this up as well, is to take you up on Hugh's comment about the funding escalator not being an escalator at all, but being a series of stepping stones that were too small. And, you know, there wasn't enough finance and the valuations are too low. You're at the top end of the escalator, or you're the biggest stepping stone, however you want to do it.
Yeah, I was quite disturbed to see sort of IPO at the top, and then it just flattens out. You know, that's the end. That's not the way that we'd like to see it. No, look, you know, Hugh is in the middle of that journey, and so, you know, I could completely respect and understand his position. I think that there is there's always more out there than you probably realise from the outset, because it is such a fragmented market now in terms of the private, all the private funding sources as well as the public. And the other thing that I would say is that quite often, you know, there is this perception that public markets, IPO, right, is the top of the escalator. It's once we're the, you know, the fully formed business, and you know, it's something always in the future. That's not always the case, as is sort of set out with Diaceutics and with several others that have come through recently. So a good example, you know, of business, another life sciences business actually that has taken future funding through the British Business Bank is Bivictrix, which is an oncology business, which is, you know, really just getting to that commercialization of their IP stage, and they've listed successfully on AIM this year. So actually, there's several different paths. I wouldn't see it as linear as an escalator. There's different ways of doing things.
Great, thanks, Bob, for that. Now, Brendan, I'm turn to you because you're at the forefront of scaling a very impressive Northern Ireland business, CDE Global. You know, in that process, what did you find? What would you have found maybe more useful to have had from the advisory community as you took it globally?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I suppose just to give a little bit of colour and context to that, because the advice would have been very different at the different stages. I joined the business back in 2004, you know, 18 years ago. I became the MD a number of years later in 2007, just before the global financial crisis. But in the ensuing 10 years, we realised almost 500 million in cumulative revenues, almost 50 million pounds in profit, and we were very healthy from a cash position. We had a very simple mantra, you know, it's cliched: sales is vanity, profit sanity, cash is reality. And we were very much, I suppose, self-funded in terms of our growth. We exported to more than 100 countries and set up an office presence in almost 6 continents. So you can imagine during that journey, going from a small company to a medium-sized company to a large company. I joined when we 15 people. I left when we had almost 700. So the requirements from the advisory community were very different early on. So just to give a broad overview, I suppose, in terms of some of the requirements that I feel reflecting back would have been useful from the advisory community. First of all, help create a culture of cash consciousness. And what I mean by that is, you know, again, give the entrepreneurs and founders an understanding of some of the key metrics to be aware of. So too often the accountant meets with the business owner once a year. They go through the P&L. Depending on your background, you may or may not understand what actually a P&L looks like, or what you should be looking for in the P&L. So something that I brought in very early on was simply cash headroom, for example, and we always targeted to have 6 months of cash headroom. Part of that is it's a psychological one in many respects. Whenever you have a cash buffer, your decision-making process becomes different. It frees you up to start thinking much more into the future than the here and now, in terms of how do I meet the payroll next month. So just helping create that cash consciousness with providing some practical tools and resources for the client companies. And some of those things practically help with constructing commercial terms. Again, I came to it as a small business of getting our customers to fund our growth as much as we possibly could. But the resistance internally, whenever I suggested moving from 10% deposit terms to 30%, you know, the sales team just looked at me horrified, saying, we're going to lose all of our customers. And so just helping at a practical level. What I'd say is create a community of scaling exemplars. You know, the advisory community has the privilege of working with a large portfolio of companies who have been there and done it at different stages. And for us, whenever I was in the CDE, you're in this bubble. It's your life, and to kind of lift your head out and to be signposted to others who have been there and done it would have been fantastic. But referred earlier on to the fact that we moved from 1 to 4. I'm very privileged now to be friendly with Brendan Mooney of KNOS, and I brought Brendan in to speak to our participants on our current ScaleX Accelerator program hosted by Simple Scaling. And you know, again, when I was coming through growing the company, helping grow the company, listed companies were something that happened in London, and you had a certain accent if you were going to list. You know, it wasn't a local guy from County Down who was running a leading company on the FTSE 250. So to have that local accent and to give people exposure to that, this isn't a guy flying in from London telling you how great the listing process is and then flying back again, and you kind of struggle to relate to that. The fact that we've now got exemplars. I went to school with Philip White. He was in my class, the FD in Diaceutics again. So, you know, having now access to people who have been there and done it is so critically important. Don't underestimate that in terms of the advisory community, the importance of that, and you know, creating those introductions. This is a confidence thing, and scaling wasn't a word again whenever I was coming through. Scaling only came into my business lexicon in, I would say, probably 2014, 2015. So it's now a thing, which is great. We can talk about scaling. And what I'd suggest there is encourage that growth mindset amongst your portfolio companies. So too often as advisors, again, this is maybe with the accountants, we're too worried about maybe saving £1,000 on our corporation tax this month, you know, this year, and suggesting that we employ the wife to reduce that, as opposed to sitting back with our portfolio company and say, guys, let me understand your vision. You know, you're small now, but we often overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, but underestimate what we can achieve in 3 and 5 years. So have that conversation and seed a growth mindset. So you won't always be small, but you've got to create a mindset of growth, as opposed to let's try and kind of create a structure now which is going to save a few pounds, which actually hampers your growth in the future. So again, psychologically, you know, there's an organizational subconscious there which we should be seeding about being large. And so encourage that growth mindset. I'd say sponsor scale-up initiatives. You know, now scale-up is a thing. Get involved in scale-up initiatives and become partners in the growth journey. Again, I come to my own journey, my own experience as an MD. Right up to 2007, before the global financial crisis, trading companies were overlooked. If you didn't have property in your balance sheet, really, you know, you weren't on the advisor's radar. That changed, and we, you know, previously I would say the advisors didn't truly understand the business, and we invited then our advisors, particularly the bank, to say, come and partner our growth journey. We have an ambition to grow. Come and partner our growth journey. Don't meet us once a year, flick through the accounts, and then we meet at 12 months' time. Come and work within our business. And actually, you know, credit to some of the financial institutions that we were partnering with at that time. They did. I said, come, I'll create an office for you right in the hub of the business and get to feel the people, the culture, the challenges, hear the chat, and get to understand us as a business. So we're not having an hour's conversation once a year. So that's broadly, I could go into the nuances at each stage, Stuart, but conscious of time.
No, that's great. Thank you. And Brendan, I'd like to just before we have put another question to you, I'd like to actually pick up that with you know, some of the points there with, you know, James and Gemma and Bod, especially about how advisors can support their scale-up clients. I mean, you know, Brendan's referred to, you know, kind of creating a community of scaling exemplars, about being more of a partner. What's your perspective on how the advisory community, they're here sort of listening in, can support their scale-up clients? Gemma, can I just take you up.
Yeah, sure, Stuart. And to be honest, we'll come on to this later with David, but to a couple of things Brendan sort of picked up on, like a lot of the management teams we back, there's no finance function. So rather than sort of penny pinching, actually employ a good finance director, and we can help with that. And then even during sort of raising funds in the process, having an advisor on board to help these businesses, pull together their thoughts around what does the next 3 years look like. I think there's a lot of really, cracking businesses in Northern Ireland where they just sort of keep their head under the radar, but actually don't take time to think, okay, what does this business look like in the next 3 years, 5 years? Where do I want this business to be? And then almost work backwards from that and go, right, what do I need to do to achieve that overall goal? And I think there's room for advisors to sort of challenge their management teams more to say, look, where is this business going? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to pass it down to the family? Or do you want to take on some sort of funding? Or is it a mixture of all of the above? And I think it's a difficult question to ask people, what do they want? A lot of people don't know the answer to that. And then it's a case of, right, what do they need to do to get to that end result? And does funding accelerate that to get them to where they want to be quicker? So I definitely think there's rooms for advisors to challenge, and us, management teams, to go, okay, what is it you're building here? And yeah, as I say, so Brendan sort of picked up, rather than penny pinching, going, okay, to get there, who do you need around your board table to help with that plan? Whether it's the finance, an operational person, sales, business, marketing, sales, and all the rest of it. And I think, a lot of people think, oh, we can just plod on and do this ourselves. You can't do everything. So take that advice from your advisors to say, actually, you need to build that team round about you to scale as well.
Thank you, Gemma. James, anything else you'd like to add before I just go back?
I think firstly, I've got to echo Gemma and sort of Brendan's advice that having finance functions and having your finance filings in order in terms of any investment, whether it's private or public, is absolutely paramount. So if kind of the advisory community focuses on that, I think that's key. I think Brendan talked about sort of scaling exemplars, having as an advisor, building out your network of people who sit on boards and provide non-exec or advisory capabilities. That's good for you because then when your clients do ask, you can provide them with that network, but also it's fairly reciprocal that if the sort of the people you're putting on those boards, they also have their other interests, so that can work quite nicely both ways. I think the other thing to maybe think about, and this is probably more from a public point of view than private, is just enhancing your general profile, whether that's kind of advertising, industry competence, trade news, those sorts of things. I think enhancing your profile, certainly from a public markets point of view, can be very helpful. And there are both sort of financial focused and also more general sort of PR and marketing agencies that can help with that as well. So I guess with the majority, I think, of the kind of watchers being from the accounting community, having sort of tie-ins with other advisors that can add in sort of other services will also be very helpful.
Stuart, can I just come in very quickly on that as well? From an exchange perspective, we see the advisory community as absolutely fundamental to maintaining the health of the scaling markets, and in particular the public markets. And my background is that I was an advisor for 18 years before joining the exchange 3 years ago. And the reason that the exchange is employing people like me is to help create a bridge from the exchange to management teams, but also to the advisory community to help them to skill up, to tool up if necessary, to understand doing IPOs better, because we recognise that there isn't a huge volume of these, but interest is growing, and it's down to us to help advisors be able to advise their clients on whether an IPO might be the right thing to do or not. And actually, a lot of the work that goes into an IPO, whether it's around the financials, as Gemma said, or preparing a business for an investment process, whether it's around the diligence, is very, very similar, if not identical, whether you're looking at a private investment and a piece of M&A or IPO. And therefore helping advisors to understand that and therefore be open to IPO as a route for their clients is something that the exchange is employing people like me to do. So if anybody wants to reach out after this call to have a further conversation, then that's what I'm here for.
Great, thanks, Bod. Brendan, just one of the other steps, and I know this is from having built, obviously you've built the finance team and taken on the, but one of the next big steps was exporting, and I wonder if you could just touch on the export growth that CDE Global underwent, and again with that sort of through the lens of the advice that you were able to draw on what you would have liked to have had as the business grew internationally.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and that's both from a personal perspective and from an organizational perspective. So in many respects, I was very fortunate to be part of an industry and to lead a company that was part of this, what we termed the materials handling industry, which simply had exporting in its DNA. What I always advise to certainly the participants in our own programs, if you have an ambition to scale, then that goes hand in hand with an ambition to export. So you've got to get very comfortable very quickly with what exporting is and the nuances of what's involved. And again, that socializing with other exporters, being in a cluster of export oriented companies makes all of that very, very easy in terms of actually just, again, seeding the psychology around exporting. The specifics then really, I'll never forget putting the first letter of credit in place and being asked for a bill of lading, and I very proudly went back and corrected their spelling and said it must be bill of loading. So the nuances of actually, again, from a cash perspective, protecting your cash whenever you export. Certain markets, the likes of the Middle East, they assume that the last 10% will be held by them unless you have protection in place through the letter of credit mechanism to ensure that you get paid, which is so critically important. Again, then all of this back to kind of having that cash consciousness. And I always appeal, and we always tested the advisors in terms of being innovative in the solutions that they provided, discounting LCs again as a mechanism for actually getting the cash fuel to continue our growth, and working with us to understand that we didn't necessarily need overdraft facilities, but what we needed was bank guarantee facilities for the large multi-million-pound projects we were securing in foreign markets. And whenever we worked hand in hand with our banks to do that, actually having those guarantees to protect the customer and give the customer comfort and confidence that their deposit would be secured actually became a source of competitive advantage for us against other competitors who couldn't provide those services. So just being innovative in relation to the traditional view of working capital facilities and working alongside your scale-up clients to understand, again, the challenges within their business and how then you can be creative together to continue to support that export journey. So yeah, exporting just part and parcel of the scale-up experience. So critically important that the advisory community becomes very familiar with what that is and what's involved. And I come back to the importance of the clusters and the signposting again. I always looked for, and I would have went to Invest NI first and foremost to say, is there somebody who's been there and done it? I think of setting up business in Belo Horizonte in South America and appealing to them to, find me somebody who I can speak to who has trodden the path before, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I still have a book up there, Doing Business in Brazil. I kind of educated myself on that one, where they kind of struggled to put me in touch with somebody who's been there and done it. So critically important that, again, laying the breadcrumbs, just being mindful and understanding your client base, what their needs will be at the next stage, and connecting them to willful other companies and potential mentors on the journey.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm mindful that we've only got 5 minutes left. This is shooting by, and I wanted to also ask you about the ESG and the net zero agenda, and which is becoming obviously a central focus in many new investments. And I just wonder whether, Gemma, as an investor, are you allocating more weight to the the ESG credentials, the net zero commitments of companies before you invest. And maybe then Bob and James, whether you could pick this up, what's your perspective? And again, with what can advisors be doing to better prepare businesses to have these, obviously this kind of discussion. But Gemma first.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Stuart. I mean, it's a big thing, and we're taking it very seriously. So when we're looking at new investments, we are sort of assessing their ESG credentials, and actually saying, okay, how can we improve them for each of our portfolio companies? So we've actually done a big exercise with our portfolio. Then we look at it when we're investing, and we're actually looking as an organisation to do more investments into the ESG space. So I don't know if it's been announced yet, but we've got someone joining the team based in London that will be sort of heading up that team and it will be done regionally, to say, okay, what more can we do to invest in that space? But it's definitely very high up on our agenda, amongst other initiatives. But we think definitely, when it comes to exit, and we're looking to sell our portfolio, then buyers will be looking and doing diligence on ESG, for example, and saying, okay, is this business doing as much as it can be? And I think if you've got a business that's doing all this work, then that will improve their valuation as well. So yeah, it's very much high on our agenda. And David, who's going to be speaking next, it's good timing because at our next board we're actually assessing the ESG credentials of Bob and Bert's, and actually saying, okay, what more can we do? They do a lot of good things with the community, being more carbon neutral if we can, but there's always room for improvement. So it's very much, I think, a focus point for all businesses now.
James, anything that you're seeing, especially in what and how advisors can be?
Yeah, so I think as Gemma highlighted, it's something that's become very important, certainly over the past few years. But I think there remains a balance in that you can't be scaling your business and commit to be a B Corp. It just doesn't work, right? So there are sort of the basic things that you can do and get right and look to monitor. And I think for certainly scaling or smaller businesses, that's the best kind of from an environmental data point. It's sort of your waste, your water, your energy, those sorts of things. Environmental policies, sustainability policies, they sound scary, but if you Google them, I'm sure you can find one and adapt it for exactly how you want to use it. On a social level, it's kind of looking at your metrics, your employee turnover, how much of your profit, if there is any, that you're paying in tax, things like that. And governance is, commitment to diversity, gender pay gaps, all those sorts of things. ESG doesn't have to be complicated. You just need to sort of apply sort of simple metrics, make sure you track them and provide commitments to try and improve those. And if anyone on the advisory side wants a sort of cheat sheet, if you go on FinnCap's website, we have an ESG scorecard that you can get for free and work through that way. But no, it certainly is important, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to commit to be net zero next year to sort of tick those boxes. It's about commitment and kind of thinking through processes in the right way.
Mm-hmm. It is being thought through a lot at the public markets end, isn't it, Bob? Though this is
it's a massive focus for investors. There's a huge amount now of capital which is ring fenced to specifically invest into companies with an environmental focus. And to help do that, we've established something called the Green Economy Mark, which is awarded by London Stock Exchange to companies which derive more than 50% of their revenues from activities which are promoting a greener alternative to an existing product or process, or helping with the energy transition in some way. And we're up to just over 100 companies on the exchange now with that Green Economy Mark. And investors are not just doing this because they know it's the right thing to do and because of the challenge to humanity that we're all having to address. They're also doing it because it's a sound investment strategy. These businesses have outperformed the markets by over 40% over the last 3 years. So this is now becoming self-fulfilling from a sort of purely capitalist perspective as well, which is good news for any businesses that have got a green product or service that they're looking to come to market with.
Thank you, Bod, and Brendan. I know that actually I'd love to be able to talk to you about materials reclaiming and through an ESG and environmental prism, but we've run out of time. It's 20 past, and I'm going to have to hand back to Susan. But James, Gemma, Bod, and Brendan, thank you all for your contributions. And Susan, back to you.
Thanks, Stuart. A really great discussion there, and I think plenty of food for thought for our listeners this morning. So I'd like to spend the next sort of 5-10 minutes just giving you an overview of how BBB are supporting the scale-up economy, and that's both on a UK-wide basis, but also more specifically here in NI. So I'll start with just in terms of the role of the UK network. I talked last week about who BBB are and how we operate as an organisation. So kind of in a quick 30-second recap for that, we're the UK Government Economic Development Bank, and with a very simple aim of making finance markets work better for smaller businesses across the UK. We operate both on the supply side of the equation, providing finance to SMEs through a wide range of third-party delivery partners, and then also on the demand side of the equation through the UK network team, which I'm part of. So as you can see from the slide, the UK network team is essentially the eyes and ears of the bank. We work with a range of senior level stakeholders across both public and private sector to identify and understand access to finance challenges faced by SMEs across the different regions and nations of the UK. And a big part of my role is intel gathering. We use this then to feed back both internally and then into BES and government to help us shape programmes and activities that was to help us raise awareness of the finance solutions. So in terms of a recent example of some of our intel gathering, I'm going to use the Ipsos Mori Access to Finance survey. Earlier this year, the bank commissioned Ipsos Mori to survey intermediaries like yourselves who engage directly with the small and medium-sized businesses. And the survey focused on 3 core areas: the SME demand for finance, supply of finance, and then the wider finance ecosystem. And whilst we have a whole report worth of findings this morning, I just want to zone in and give you a quick snapshot of those findings that specifically relate to the scale-up economy within Northern Ireland. So if we look first at the demand for finance, we had 72% of NI respondents cited lack of awareness of finance options as the biggest barrier to SME demand for finance. And that's a greater proportion than when compared to the UK average of 65%. Looking then at supply for finance, almost 2 in 5 respondents in NI identified gaps in later stage equity supply, and that's compared to 1 in 5 across the UK. And then if we look at the wider ecosystem support framework, we have 55% of NI respondents deemed the ecosystem for SMEs scaling up as inadequate. Again, a greater proportion when compared to the UK average of 42%. So I guess the next question here is then, once we gather this information, then what are we doing with it? So the survey findings, they told us we had a lack of awareness of funding options. So to help address this, BBB partner with Intertrade Ireland and Invest NI to deliver an annual Access to Finance conference. This year we delivered the event virtually in June. We reached over 300 delegates across the 2 days. And the Ambition to Scale conference focused on the importance of accelerator programs and social capital when it comes to raising finance to scale a business, but also looked at the ambition and the vision required to attract the attention of global investors. The survey also told us we needed to do more across the ecosystem to support our scaling businesses. So to help address this, BBB have partnered with Chartered Accountants, ScaleUp Institute and UK BAA to deliver this Funding Future Growth webinar series. And then, having told us that we have a later stage equity supply gap, in addition to a range of supply side interventions, which I'll come to next, we partner with Catalyst to deliver the Inbound Investors event, which takes place next month, where we'll see 80 plus external investors come into NI and provide the opportunity for businesses essentially struggling to raise those larger funding rounds within NI. It gives them the opportunity to engage with these external investors on a pre-match basis. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of some of the demand side initiatives we're working on. And next, I just want to touch on the supply side of things. So first up is the Regional Angels Programme. It's a 100 million fully commercial co-investment programme that's designed to reduce regional imbalances in access to finance. So we launched this in 2018, and just in the last few months, it's now fully committed across 8 fund investments, one of which I'm pleased to say is co-fund NI, which is managed locally by Clarendon Fund Managers. Many of the other funds actually that the RAP programme has invested in include Power Equity and SFC Capital, and whilst they're not necessarily based here in NI, they are active investors in NI companies such as Detactics, Plotbox, Esther and Interpod. We also have the Enterprise Capital Funds. So established in 2006, the ECAF programme supports emerging and first-time fund managers to operate in the UK market. And it's those fund managers that are specifically targeting the early stage small businesses that have that long-term growth potential. So within that, we have committed 1.62 billion across 64 funds in the UK. Again, a number of which of these are supporting NI companies. Some of you may be familiar with the likes of IQ Capital and their ongoing investment in Eurovalence. Then also on the supply side, we have a number of interventions from our commercial subsidiary British Patient Capital with the 375 million Future Fund Breakthrough programme, and then we also have a 200 million life sciences programme that provides cornerstone investments in UK life science funds. So then just looking then more closely at the Regional Angels Programme investment in co-fund and what a difference that has made to local businesses. Many of you will know co-fund is a 47.3 million equity fund, co-invests alongside angels and other private investors. Typical investment size is sort of 100k to 500k in any one round and up to 2 million in any one company over a series of investment rounds. So back in December 20, BBB through the Regional Angels Programme then invested 10 million alongside current funders Invest NI. So whilst initially envisaged, taking into account obviously the additional private sector leverage, it was envisaged that the fund would deliver 118 million of total investment to NI businesses, but with only 31.5 of the 43.7 deployed, it's already the total funding currently sits at 178.5. So really strong levels of activity and private sector leverage coming through there. Another point just worth noting, really undeterred by COVID, the investment that since the RAP investment took place, the fund has invested in 20 companies with checks ranging from sort of 130k into early stage startups such as Team Fee Pay through to the 700 and the 800k checks into the later stage sort of scaling companies such as Be Secure and Cirdan, who we heard from earlier. Both of those companies have also benefited from the BBB backed future fund and have also actually attracted significant external investment from the UK and the US. So another critical piece in terms of that connectivity with the external investors. So say great levels of investment activity from the team at Clarendon and some really strong portfolio companies in the mix. So definitely one to be aware of when you're talking to your clients. So hopefully that gives you a flavour in terms of what BBB are doing to support the scale-up economy here in NI. Any questions on the content there, please feel free just to get in touch with me directly. moving on then to something slightly more exciting than the stats and the slides, I would like to introduce the final session for this morning. And so for the next 25 minutes, you will have the pleasure of hearing from David Ferguson of Bob and Bert's and back to Gemma Hamilton of BGF as they talk us through the Bob and Bert's story so far. Morning both, welcome.
Hi Susan.
Gemma, I'll come to you first if I can. I know, you know, some great insights there on the earlier panel. To kick us off, maybe you could tell us just a little bit more about BGF's activity in NI and obviously then your involvement in Bob and Bert's.
Yeah, no, sure, Susan. So again, just conscious people might not know who BGF is, but we're basically the largest equity investor in the UK and Ireland. To date, we've backed about 400 companies and invested about 2.9 billion, I think it is, but we're very much a regional investor. So I cover Northern Ireland and Central Scotland. So we have an office in Belfast and we've also got offices in Cork and Dublin. So very much have a team focusing on the different regional areas. So we've backed, I think it's 6 companies in Northern Ireland, and they've ranged from, you know, a waste management facility plant, River Ridge Recycling, if anyone's aware of that one. We've got family-owned U-Form, which designs and paint finishes kitchen doors. And then we backed David and the team in 2017. We invested 2 million into Bob and Bert's, and I'll let David tell everyone all about it. But basically it was to help with their rollout plan and their expansion from Northern Ireland right over to Scotland and England.
Thanks, Jim. I think it's really important just that the audience gets that message that it's not the typical tech companies, you know, so it's great for you to share that with us. David, I'll come over to you now. Can I ask you just give us a brief introduction and share with us the Bob and Bert's story so far?
Yeah, sure. My name is David Ferguson from Bob and Bert's. I guess Bob and Bert's is a Northern Irish coffee shop. Now I guess we'd be classified as a chain, even though we don't always like to admit that. I guess we started in 2013 in the seaside town of Portstewart. At the time, no huge grand plans to get to where we are now, if we're honest. It was just a gap in the market was seen around big branded coffee chains maybe not having such quite a good food offer. So we kind of developed a kind of hybrid concept between a coffee shop and a restaurant. So we're kind of what I'd like to describe as a modern day cafe. We're doing the kind of good standard coffee coupled with kind of cafe food. I guess in 2013, the business was started out of our own pockets right through until 2016. At that stage, we got to the point where we had, I think it was 15 stores, and they were all actually financed one store, financed the next store, financed the next store in terms of kind of get it open, the capital investment and so on. At that stage, the brand was doing exceptionally well, was being well received across Northern Ireland. And I guess we kind of had come to a point towards the end of 2016 where we'd opened 4 stores that year. Probably working capital become quite tight just with doing so many, one after the other. And what we realized was that actually we maybe do have a concept that we could scale here, but in order to scale it and scale it faster, we would need some capital investment, both for doing more stores at a faster rate and also investment into technology, into the existing stores, investment into a head office function, which we actually didn't have at that stage, and investment just into the infrastructure. And I guess at that point we were introduced to BGF and Gemma and her team.
Yeah, I think a fantastic story so far, David, and I'm sure there's plenty more to come with it. Talk to me a little bit more just in terms of the finance behind the growth. You know, you touched there on each of the first stores sort of self-financing the next one, and then how that evolved to the equity investment. But the other bit I'd like to know is whether there was that accountant or sort of corporate finance advisor role involved, and just how critical they were in terms of bringing that funding package together and getting you essentially to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, the first stores were all financed basically out of our own pockets, and then basically through supplier credit, if we're honest, around sort of capital expenditure. But then at the point of 2016, we kind of had some mutual friends who worked in corporate finance came to us and said, like, you guys thought about taking this forward. So to be honest, at that point, we kind of were happy just to continue the way we were going, do it out of our kind of self-financing method that we had done. We knew it was kind of tight, but then I guess they kind of opened the bigger picture of, well, there are funders out there who would fund this and invest in it in terms of going faster and actually, you know, into outside Northern Ireland, I guess. So we were introduced then to corporate finance advisor, who I guess introduced us to a couple of investment companies and went through a couple of different scenarios, and we met BGF. I mean, at that point, we had, I guess, ourselves, the management team, myself and my brother-in-law, Colin, and to be honest, that was it really. There was obviously store level teams, which is more operational, and then we had an outsourced bookkeeping function. So really, we were just kind of going from day to day, operating coffee shops, and then but what we had to do is take our heads out of that and get some help in developing a business model that would actually be invested in and scalable, and that's where the corporate finance advisor helped us greatly, and they kind of, with the input of us, developed a business model and kind of a good plan to take to equity investors, which BGF then were quite keen on, and the rest kind of history from there.
I suppose that, you know, you touched on the very fact that it's a small team in terms of the management team. You know, raising equity, it can be quite a time-consuming process. So did having that advisor function on board allow you to keep more of a focus on the business than I suppose otherwise would have been the case? Yeah, certainly. I mean, the advisor function effectively became our finance director and financial controller. There was kind of two of them, worked hand in hand, and they basically, that's what they became for about 6 months. And yeah, kind of we operate in the business, and then outside of ours, kind of we're sitting down with these guys and really getting it on paper. And actually at that point, it wasn't until we started going through that process of getting the whole business on paper that we actually kind of sat back and realized that we had a substantial business, because you can kind of get bogged down in the day-to-day kind of operating 15 stores, and it's not until you sit down and add it all up on paper and work out where you are and work out where there's potential gains to be made, where you're maybe wasting some money, where you're not, where, you know, where investment could get future growth. So it was actually a pretty good exercise, whilst it was painful at times, I'm not going to lie, but yeah, it was pretty worthwhile, because now that model's actually, we still use that model to this very day. That's just been further developed as we've added stores, further developed as we're kind of forecasting going into different regions. We used it during the COVID outbreak, because we've kind of stuck to the model, kind of know where we are. So it was very easy then when COVID happened, we knew exactly where we were, exactly how to react. So it's kind of been a tool that can't really put a value on, if I'm honest, yeah. And have to put hands up and say that was actually all down to the corporate finance advisor at the time. No pain, no gain, David, yeah? That's it, yeah. Gemma, I think it's fair to say, you know, many of us wouldn't necessarily view a high street sort of coffee and food chain like Bob and Bert's as a typical candidate for equity investment. So talk me through what attracted BGF to invest. Touch also, it'd be good for you to touch also just on how important it was to have that corporate financer advisor role involved in the proposition, and then just in terms of over and above actually writing the check, what was the value add to David in terms of bringing you guys to the table? So sorry, a couple of
yeah, a few questions. Yeah, no, that's fine, Susan. So so first of all, you know, there is a lot to like about what David and the team are doing at Bob and Bert's, but you know, with my investor hat on, for us, it's the fact, you know, they had a proven and scalable model there. So when we invested, David and the team already had 15 profitable sites, and they had done that in such a short period of time. So this wasn't backing someone that has 2 or 3, you know, coffee shops. Maybe it's going to work, maybe it isn't. The guys had demonstrated that it has worked. So it gives us comfort when they produce this plan of we're going to get to 30 sites. We've got that comfort. Well, if they've got to 15, they know what they're doing. So that's a kind of big tick for us. And the other thing is, and hopefully people have been into Bob and Bert's, but you know, we really liked, you know, that concept and the business model. So the Bob and Bert's brand is instantly recognizable, and what we liked about the offering is it it basically appeals to a wide demographic. Everyone's a customer. And I think, from our perspective, David and the team have real clarity around their site strategy. So they know that we're focusing on market towns, high streets, places where there's high footfall, and they know exactly what their customer wants. So we're not going into city centre locations. And obviously during COVID, that's been a big positive for us in having these kind of market town locations where people are popping out for their coffee, morning, lunchtime and early dinner. So that was another sort of tick in the box. And then from a financial perspective, and David has not disclosed yet, but he is a chartered accountant by background, and the accountants will like this on this call, but
it's not very good.
Oh, no. He's working on it. But the kind of financial metrics around this business were really attractive for us. So as an investor, we will benchmark them against others in the sector, and we can see, what their guys are doing in terms of labour margin, EBITDA margin, and more importantly, as an investor, that return on investment. So when we're rolling out more sites, are we making the right decisions? Where are we spending our money? Are we getting the return? So that's really important, not for us, but for when the guys go to sell, whenever that may be, a buyer will be going, right, is this business stack up financially compared to others? And then I think, again, despite the pandemic, the hospitality sector is a massive market and it's a growing market, particularly around that coffee shop chains. So the guys have got a real opportunity here to scale. And again, I'll let David sort of come into the detail, but when they presented their plan to us, they said, we want to get to 30 sites. We're sitting at 23 and, we've got 7 more to go, which are all in the pipeline. So for us, the biggest thing when we're investing is that management team. And I think that's a big attraction for us is David and Colin and the team that they've built today. We believed in them. They're entrepreneurial, they're ambitious and driven, and they're proving that. They probably want to do a lot more than 30 sites, and we'll be supportive of that. So that's, hopefully, Susan, that can answer the question as to why we found this an attractive investment and continuing to support the guys with their plans. And then I think the second question was around the role of the advisor.
Yeah, just how important that was to you, and then the value add.
Yeah.
ETF.
So the role of the advisor, I've touched on this earlier, but for us, we need to be comfortable with the financial plan, the growth plan, and that strategy. There was, as David said, no finance director in place, so the advisor helped pull together that plan, and then they could run the sensitivity scenarios that we would need to see. What happens if things cost more or take a bit longer? So that was pretty fundamental for any investment that we look at. But also the advisor did project management. I hope you don't mind me saying this, David, but got everyone working in the same way and basically set out help us with the timelines, made sure David and Colin answered the questions that we asked them, and help with the questions, you mean? And help with the diligence process as well, because this was all new to David and the team. Again, don't take this the wrong way, David, you're not corporate. So this was a new, going through the process, it was a kind of new thing for them. So that has been fundamental. And I think just overall, Susan, the advisor made our life easier. When we're asking questions, we go to them rather than David and Colin to allow them to get on with the day job. And then finally, just on what added value we bring to the table, because very much at BGF, it's not just the money, it's the other things that we can help companies with. So I think, first of all, we take a seat on the board, but we're not there to get involved in the day-to-day operations. We're very much a minority investor, but we're there to help with the sort of the strategic decisions and challenge David and the team to say, okay, where are the next new sites? Should they be Scotland? Should they be England? And I think we're collectively saying, we've got more to go at in England. So we will provide that input, and that's just from, we sit on other boards. We also have a lot of intel from the other companies we back. As I mentioned, we've backed 400 companies. We've backed a lot in the kind of hospitality sector. So we like to say to David and Colin, go and speak to the other chief execs of these companies and what challenges are they facing right now. And then in addition to the portfolio network, we also have and Brendan was talking about this earlier, a kind of network of non-execs. So when we invested, we introduced David and I think it was about 10 people, and they interviewed about 3 individuals, all from different kind of hospitality backgrounds. But David and the team selected a guy called Mohan Mansagani, who was the ex-CFO for Costa Coffee. So Mohan knows all the challenges and pitfalls that Costa Coffee had when they were rolling out sites. So he can share that intel and help David when they're looking at new sites, and also using his network of contacts. So for example, professionalizing some of the kind of IT systems we talked about earlier. So we'd like to share all that kind of knowledge, contacts, and also just generally helping with, preparing the business for exit and working alongside advisors to say, okay, what do the guys need to do? What does good look like? Why is this buyer going to buy Bob and Bert's? So hopefully, David will correct me if I'm wrong, we're more helping from a strategic point of view and very much not meddling in, what's on the breakfast menu today, is it Ulster fry or is it the rainbow cake? We stray away from all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, it goes far beyond the check writing.
Yeah.
But David, I suppose despite, and this came up on the panel earlier, but despite that value add that Gemma refers to, convincing business owners and especially family-run business owners across NI that equity is a viable finance option, it can be a bit of a struggle, to say the least. It's often viewed as that outsider coming in to take control and ultimately try and sell the business. So just, is this a truth or a myth? What's your first-hand experience as a family-run business?
I mean, from our perspective, of course, there was those discussions like, is this what we really want? Do we really want someone coming in here? And I mean, Gemma will probably back me in this. We're quite strong personalities, the pair of us, in terms of where we want to go with this and our ideas. But I think the key here was that we knew BGF were coming in as a minority. BGF were going to add value in terms of that extra network and those extra people who bring to the table. And actually, probably through the investment process, we actually realized that whilst we are, I don't like to say it, quite good at the brand side, we're quite good at the kind of where we want the brand to go, we're quite good at where we want the sites to be, we're good at selecting the sites. But as I guess Mohan would always remind us now, is saying, how do we make good better? And so I guess where BGF have added value is reminding us you do need to maybe have a stock system and know your stock values each week and know all these little things that actually could further down the line be a bit of a hiccup. So it's that kind of added value were areas where probably we wouldn't have focused on, if I'm totally honest. So I guess it was during the investment process that we began to realize and that actually we do need to start focusing on these things, and the best way to focus on these things is try and bring in some experts. The best way to bring them in potentially is through some equity investors, because the alternative would have been potentially to go and get some debt finance, but you wouldn't have had that kind of added value that we needed at the time for our business. So for us, I guess the aversion was there, of course it was, but once we got comfort that these guys weren't going to kind of meddle in those things that we enjoyed and those things that we think is important, the most important, i.e. the brand, where we're going strategically, all that, well, not, I mean, brand strategically in terms of development of that, and these guys could add their value on making the actual business better in terms of the back of house stuff. That's where I think these guys have really made us grow up, if I'm totally honest. We sometimes have a bit of a laugh behind their backs and say, flip me, can you imagine we now have board meetings? Putting this stuff on paper. But I guess that all started 3-4 years ago during this process, but it's made us reflect on our business and make such better business decisions. So the aversion will always be there, but I think if you embrace it and realize that actually and focus on the value these guys can add, then you'll get so much more out of it. So I guess not think of it, oh, they're taking a chunk of my pie. I think you need to see it as, oh, they're going to make our business so much better and bigger than what we could ourselves. If you view of it in that respect, then in my eyes it's a win-win situation. The other key thing was you mentioned about these guys are just going to come in, invest, and then force you down a sell route. Like that was discussed at length with BGF. I know each equity house is probably different, but they are minority. Like there has to be an agreement for anything like that. They cannot drag us down that route. If we don't want to do it, we're all stuck with each other for a long time. We got a lot of comfort around that. We also got a lot of comfort around the people being the right people. So whilst we're a family business and we've kind of got, quite a sort of good culture, fun culture, these guys are part of that culture now. They fit into that culture. That was important for us. Gemma knows we're not the most corporate, so she doesn't come to us with corporate stuff. And equally, I'm sure that's kind of fit it with our culture very well. So cultural fit, and also kind of just that comfort around they're only going to add value where they know they can really add value, and not try and add value to something that they're not a specialist in. That was the key for us.
Yeah, I think that relationship side of it, and the partnership approach to it really comes through there. I just want to sort of turn to COVID here briefly, and I'll bring you both in on this one. I think it's fair to say that the last 18 months have been a challenge for most businesses, but even more so for those in the hospitality sector. Was it a case that you had to press pause and just focus on survival at a point in time? Was there a requirement for additional funding to keep you on that sort of growth strategy and keep on track? David, I'll bring you in first, but Gemma, it'd be good to hear the investor perspective on that one too.
Yeah, sure. Initially, it was pause. It was definitely pause back in sort of the back end of March 2020, whenever everything was closed down. We closed all our business down and kind of went into survival mode. And during that, we very quickly were able to ascertain where we were at that point in time and basically do some scenario planning. Again, and we openly talk about this as a management team, if we hadn't have had BGF as an investor in 2017 and had all these disciplines embedded in our business, what happened with COVID, we would not have been able to respond as fast, because all these disciplines were basically built our business in the last 3 years to a point whereby in 2020, when COVID hit, we knew exactly where we were. We knew scenario A, B, and C, what that meant for the business in terms of where we were going. And then we actually then went to Ulster Bank and got a CBIL loan. And we got that pretty quick. I think we were probably in Northern Ireland one of the first through, to be honest, on that. And that was again based on good relationship with Ulster Bank and our relationship manager there. And secondly, just again having those good business disciplines that, to be honest, BGF and Mohan, our chairman, have kind of the previous 3 years enforced in us and made us build. And then I guess, so press pause, and then I guess pause only lasted for about 3 weeks, and that's more down to our personalities in terms of we need to get back out here and do something, because this isn't us. So then that's where we went about redeveloping a takeaway business and an app, and then actually now through COVID and through subsequent lockdowns, that's actually our business has sustained it's kind of made a pretty good contribution to our overall fixed costs. And now as we come out of COVID, hopefully more longer term, then we're now in a really good position to kind of capitalize, especially in this English market, whereby larger chains and larger high street retail and hospitality chains have kind of disappeared. Then the rents and on the high street are actually looking quite attractive. So we're seeing that as a bit of an opportunity now. So I guess we're coming out of COVID in quite a strong position, if I'm honest. We're coming out of COVID probably in a position here where we're going to want to actually accelerate slightly and get into the English market, because that's where we see where the kind of the growth for us is. But again, I go back to 2020 in March, we were only able to do this because we kind of keep on top of where we are, and we only keep on top of where we are because BGF invested and told us it was wise to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, Susan, I mean, credit due to David and the team for COVID. As we all know, every business was impacted, but hospitality took a big hit. But to see the guys respond in the right way, treat their staff in the right way, access the grants, Ulster are very supportive. It was really encouraging, and from our perspective, we did help with the application to Ulster Bank, but we also shared that intel again from what we were hearing as an organisation, whether it's through our portfolio companies or just our connections. As you know, we are a big organisation, so we were all sharing intel as to what grants we should be applying for, how long we think COVID was going to last for, all the rest of it. Obviously, none of us got that answer right, but for us, we were very supportive because David and the team have, as I say, proven that business model. And we were saying, well, look, this is a blip, but actually we've come out of this in a stronger position where it's now, let's accelerate the growth plan. And I'll let David obviously tell you what that may be.
Yeah, no, that's very encouraging to hear. Look, I'm conscious of time here, but I've another couple of questions I want to try and squeeze in. So, David, just very quickly, future plans for Bob and Bert's. What's next on the agenda?
Well, I mean, short term is in the next few weeks. We're opening a site in Preston, so that'll be our third in England. And then I guess the northwest and down into the Midlands in England, kind of the medium term goal. We kind of foresee getting 6 to 10 sites a year over the next 3 to 4 years, and probably, well, 80 to 90% of those will probably England focused, with the remaining kind of Scotland and Northern Ireland. We see that the road in England, there's much more road to run there. I mean, at home here in Northern Ireland, bar probably Enniskillen, Newry, Derry, we're kind of at the end of the road. So the big growth now for us is to get the infrastructure in place in England and accelerate it on past that 30 sites that we originally signed up to.
Very exciting story ahead. Okay, look, quick 30-second one to each of you. Gemma, one key message to the audience today in terms of how the advisors could or should support and encourage their clients to scale.
Yeah, I think you've heard the story from David, the growth he's achieved, but I think the question is, ask your clients, what would they do with 2 million, 5 million funding? What could they actually achieve? Because the funding is out there. It's just, have they got the growth plan in place? What could they actually take? Where could they take their business? With it. Okay, David, quick one from you.
Yeah, I mean, from the advisors, I think if their clients know their product and know their business and know where they're going with it, then any type of industry or any type of product or business can be invested in from an equity perspective, which we've proven here in Northern Ireland around a coffee shop. It doesn't have to be financial, tech, it can be anything, but the key is that the person who you're investing in knows their business very well and knows where they're going and knows their product.
Perfect. Look, thanks both for your contributions there. A brilliant story. So thanks for sharing. I'll have to leave it there in the interest of time. So thanks, guys. Karen, if you would do the honours, please, and launch the poll for me. If I can just ask you to take a minute just to complete these 2 short questions, just in terms of how you found today's session, and then any actions you might take off the back of it. And just also to mention, you'll get a short survey link through from the Institute immediately following this session. So please, if you can, take a minute or 2 to complete that for us. So while you're doing the poll, I just want to say huge thanks to all those involved, the speakers, panelists, the Institute for hosting us, and you, the audience, for giving up your time to join us. I hope we've achieved what we set out to do in terms of our 3 goals for today, that you're leaving with a better understanding of the opportunities and challenges facing scaling companies in NI, and what you as advisors can do to help them either seize or overcome them. A better understanding of the government programs offered by BBB and Innovate, and how you can signpost businesses to these supports. And then finally, a clear understanding of the role of finance, and particularly equity finance, in accelerating and delivering a company's growth strategy, and your role as an advisor in helping to signpost and secure that funding. If you haven't already done so, I'd ask you if you sign up for our final session next week. We're going to be focusing on angel finance, both from an investor and an investee perspective. So whether you're advising clients on the potential use of angel finance to grow their business, or advising high net worth clients who are angel investors themselves, then please do join us. We will have Rod Beer from Managing Director of UK BAA. We'll have Christine O'Neill from Basque Versa talking about the right blend of funding for her business. Mark Brownridge Director General of EISA, and Jenny Tooth, CEO of UK BAA, will chair a panel discussion with some of our most active angel investors in NI, and talk about the benefits of joining an angel network. So look, that's all from me, folks. If you want to go off and enjoy your lunch, and hopefully see you all again in a week's time. Thank you.